Yeah, Talaman, Geek Talk. Let's enjoy the show. Talaman always got a plan. Geek Talk is popping where it's really at. Represents geek culture, homie got structure. Sometimes vulgar, screw cats culture. Feel like Goofy, smart to say the least. Loving One Piece, man really loves to eat. Everybody knows the show is really is Talaman. You know what time it is. Let's go, Geek Talk.
And you, Gappy, why do you sound so weird? Me sound weird? Heard yourself lately?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Geek Talk with Tyler. We are officially back from our 1 month hiatus as we've been working on the X-Men series. Our very first episode will be releasing June 15th, and I do want to have a special thank you to all the men and women, and yes, I do say men and women, so put your comments on pause for a second, because as of now, we have no non-binary individuals. Not that I haven't not that I not wanted to recruit any, but none have actually applied. If that changes, I welcome them with open arms, but until then, I want to thank all the men and women that have been a part of this project, from the voice actors, one of which I'll get to in a minute, to the animator, Sydney, our upcoming editor, Kayla, our theme song. Big shout out to Mr. C and my Tan of My Tan cosplay, and our sponsor, Crispy Chan, and her upcoming film, Shakespeare. So Matt, how you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Tyler. Super excited to be here.
Super happy to have you here. Now, you are going to be one of the voice actors, but you've also done some acting before. Would you like to tell us a bit about that before we dive into today's topic?
Sure. I did a lot of theater in high school and college, and then I did a little bit of community theater when I got out of college, and then life and career and real world kind of got in the way of that for about almost 2 decades, about 2 decades actually. And then a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago or so, I saw an audition for a musical that is one of my favorites, and I decided to go out for it and wound up getting the lead in it. And since then, that was in January of last year, I've been pretty much doing shows nonstop. I've done 8 shows since then. And I'll be auditioning again in July for another musical. I come from a stage background, for sure, more the Kelsey Grammer acting school of musical theater and that kind of stuff. So I'm super excited. And it's also funny to me also when we talk about voice acting, and especially cartoons, is how much it's so clear that the creators of those shows are musical theater geeks, because they insert them constantly into shows, and they're always fantastic puns and parodies.
Can we also point out the irony that an upcoming X-Men voiceover is studying at the Kelsey Grammer School?
This is fantastic.
I'm not sure if that's intentional, but that's kind of a happy coincidence.
It sounds fantastic. I think it's a good happy coincidence.
Our topic today is voice acting isn't acting. Now, I'm going to stop you right there because, yes, there have been a menagerie of actors that have become voice actors over time, especially actors like Mark Hamill, Ron Perlman, most famously Robin Williams. But that's not to say anybody who is an actor can automatically become a voice actor, or that is to say they'll be good at it.
Sure. I think it's
quote Rob Paulson for a second. Voice acting is big V, little a. That does sound dirty, I know, but what he was emphasizing was that it's more acting than anything else. But it is a different breed altogether. And I do apologize. I was interrupting you, Matt. You were saying something?
No, not at all. No, I think it is really kind of fascinating to look at the evolution of it, and kind of what I was excited to talk about today is, I grew up on a probably unhealthy dose of cartoons in the 80s and 90s. I was born in 79.
I interrupt you. There's no such thing as what you're saying, but go on.
I was born in 79, so I was in quite the heyday of animated content, especially since they were still playing all the stuff from the 60s and 70s in the 80s to fill time. But it was really fun to, what I loved about it is listening to these voices that would show up in multiple properties. So like for me, Lorenzo Music was like my gateway drug into voice acting, because I was a huge Garfield fan, and then he's also showing up in the real Ghostbusters as Peter Venkman, which ironically is funny because then the original Peter Venkman of live action, Bill Murray, went on to voice Garfield in the movies back in the 2000s. So they went kind of a weird full loop circle on that. But I remember watching this guy go through, and he's Raphael in Ninja Turtles. You watch these guys that would kind of bounce through these different roles, and you could hear and listen to them. And I was kind of fascinated by what that world of voice acting must be like.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Rob Paulson and Raphael, not just because of this clip that we played, but
Yeah.
I once heard from Bloomvox Studios classes that just because you aced one role for like say you do it, there's another Jungle Book movie and you get the voice of Baloo, that does not automatically mean you're going to keep getting that voice from every other project moving forward. And
especially
really
as they branch out. Yeah.
Really depends on the incarnation we're looking at. Like Transformers Animated was a lot more cartoony. So as such, they got Tom Kenny to voice Starscream.
Mm-hmm.
Then you take a look at Transformers Prime, where you got more of a sinister Steve Bloom look to him.
I think what's kind of fascinating about that, to really tie it into kind of what you're working on and into the comic side of it, is it's very much like watching a comic run with a different author and a different artist behind it. So you've got Wolverine as a character in comics, but Wolverine is not the same in every incarnation. He doesn't look the same. He doesn't necessarily, there are truths that are going to stick to that character and be pretty integral into what they do. But then there's also runs where you're going to go way off book and do something really different. I think that's what's so fun about voice acting, is hearing, how many different Jokers have we had? How many different,
All right, so you talk about animated or live action? How the answer's the same either way. A shit ton.
I would say, for Jokers, animated has even more than live action in terms of how many people have voiced that character and how many different directions they've gone.
Animation, that's why it's easier to do.
And you're dealing with a completely different, you're painting and drawing and animating that character completely different, which is very much influencing. Sometimes both ways, right? Sometimes they're hearing a voice and they're redrawing the character based on the interpretation of someone, or vice versa. The actor is seeing a drawing or an animatic and going, oh, I need to pivot and change my delivery.
Even then, let's look at some of the Jokers we've had. Mark Hamill, of course. John DiMaggio for Under the Red Hood.
Yep. Michael Emerson. Brent
Spiner for Young Justice.
Which I love the Brent Spiner. I'm a huge fan of his. That's a great one.
Between Puck and Joker, you never expect that kind of voiceover from the guy who is one of the more logical beings within the Star Trek crew.
But and I'll keep coming back to this just because it's my background. He's another theater guy. Like, he's a guy that has worked on Broadway. He was in a revival of 1776 and absolutely crushed it. There's a lot of voice actors that are coming from stage work, and I think there's a correlation between how you're acting on stage versus how you act on film. Film is a much more quiet, intimate medium, versus stage is literally emoting to the back row, and that aligns for me much more with voice acting.
Well, that I actually do believe, because Kevin Conroy, rest in power, did actually come from a theater background.
Yep.
And let me ask you, do you watch Hell of a Boss?
I have not. I've not seen that.
I'd recommend it. It's actually pretty good. That and its sister series, Has Been Hotel.
Okay.
Has a lot of theater-based voice actors.
I'll check it out.
James Monroe Egelhard, for example.
Huge theater and major voice actor. A great crossover right there.
Alex Brightman, another example.
So great. Literally one of my idols. Beetlejuice is a bucket list role for me, for sure.
I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but those are definitely some of the two more noteworthy
Oh,
theatrical
absolutely.
characters or actors, if we're gonna be honest.
Well, yeah, and I think I mentioned before, but it's one that's so funny to me because he's had such a wide voiceover career. It is Kelsey Grammer, who's someone that comes from theater and stage, and then pops on the scene, becomes a sitcom star, but he's very theatrical in the sitcoms as well, and then hits The Simpsons and just brings Shakespeare to the silliest character, and combines those worlds. And it's such a joy to kind of watch that. You can hear the difference and same with someone like Patrick Stewart, who has transferred into voice acting very much as well, having had a huge career on TV and film. They're the ones that are really good, I think, possess a lot of that theater background. And I think it even applies to when you talk about kind of the Disneyfication and Pixarification, which I think really is where we started to replace voice actors with celebrities. And even though I will say DreamWorks is the most guilty of it, I think DreamWorks literally just casts.
I disagree. I feel like Disney is way more guilty of it, and I'll tell you why. One word: Aquafina.
That's a very fair assessment. I will say it took them a while to get to that, because I look at something like The Incredibles, and you're casting Craig T. Nelson, who is not a massive celebrity at the time of that. He's a sitcom actor who has had a little bit of a film career. They're not selling tickets to The Incredibles based on Craig T. Nelson being in it, but he's a phenomenally good voice actor playing completely against type in that character. And I think he does a lot of really fascinating. He has one moment where he gets really dark and he's like, I could snap your neck like a toothpick, and it gets real. And I'm looking at that and going, those are Pixar animators, and they're maybe not doing it as much anymore, but they used to cast so interestingly. And I apologize if you indulge me for 10 seconds on this story, but the casting of Patton Oswalt in Ratatouille is got a famous story behind it. Is he had this really filthy routine about the Omaha Steakhouse of going to Spain, this whole thing, and the animators were sold. They're like, this is Remy, this is who we want, and the studio's going, no, you can't do it. So they animated his routine with Remy the rat. They took his audio from his stage routine and they animated a whole 2-minute clip to sell the studio on it and be like, this is what we want for this voice. So I think they used to have good intentions. I don't know if they necessarily do anymore.
It kind of ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
I mean, you were mentioning Incredibles earlier, but keep in mind, they also got the guy from My Name is Earl. So take that with whatever grain of salt you want.
But at that time, that's pre-Earl. He was a Kevin Smith actor. He was doing only Kevin Smith movies. He was not a household name, and that was 2001 Incredibles. So it's like,
right. I mean, Pixar was still trying to get its roots in the ground. We just had Toy Story, Toy Story 2, A Bug's Life. I think those were like the first few.
And Bug's Life had a lot more, I think, celebrities. Yeah.
And funny enough, the other guy that was in Frasier's brother, was actually one of the characters.
Yeah, he was David Hyde Pierce, who's another theater actor. All comes back to theater.
It really does.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, Jason Lee was not, so he didn't start Earl until 2000. So what got him Earl was The Incredibles. He did Incredibles in 2004, and then he hopped on over to that. So it's interesting because I always felt DreamWorks for me you could tell it when you would watch a premiere for these movies, is you'd see, and the actors would say it. There'd be 3 actors or 4 actors there, and they go, we've never met each other. So you look at Kung Fu Panda, which I actually think is not a bad animated film, but you've got Jack Black and Angelina Jolie, and they go, we met each other at the premiere. We never worked together. We did an entire movie where we're playing characters that play off of each other, and Dustin Hoffman too. And they're like, no, we never met each other. We were never in a studio together. We didn't record. And at least I'll say back in the day, not so much anymore. Disney did used to at least keep the people in the room together. Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella recorded Timon and Pumbaa together in a room.
I mean, you got to match with the times. Let me ask you.
Mhm.
First off, we haven't done this yet. You are currently voicing the Thing, Donald Pierce, the
Yes.
Leader, Longshot, Bruto the Strongman, and both of the Gambino twins, as well as a couple of background characters here and there.
Hopefully, okay.
Well enough to get the part anyway.
There we go.
But you have, how many of the actors, upcoming or already experienced, have you met for this project?
I have not.
Myself
I haven't.
excluded.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really not that far off.
No, I mean, I think we're different now, but you're also like we're talking about doing something where we're kind of doing an affordably budgeted, release versus like the studios can get people in there together. I think they should be theoretically, to especially if it's an important interaction. I don't, it's harder on episodic. I mean, TV's always done it kind of like this, where it's been, well, not always though. I watched a lot of behind the scenes for Batman animated series, and I would see clips of Hamill and Conroy together, like they would be recording off of one another. Not always, because Hamill was a replacement.
Dynamic.
Yeah.
Fun fact for you: did you know that Tim Curry was originally going to be Joker in 2 different incarnations?
That's why it's funny. I was going to say, because the ones that they didn't record together were the first few episodes because they had Curry and they didn't like it. Now, do you know what TV series I grew up on and I was obsessed with, that Tim Curry voiced a very famous literary character in the early 90s?
I want to say the Wild Thornberrys.
No, way before that. He voiced Captain Hook in Peter Pan and the Pirates. It was this little animated show. It's the reason why I never liked the movie Hook, because I was obsessed with this cartoon.
You're talking Peter Pan, Hans Conrad Hook, right?
This is no about
the one you didn't like, right?
Oh yeah. The Robin one, the Steven Spielberg. I'm talking about the live action Steven Spielberg directed Robin Williams Captain Hook movie with Dustin Hoffman as Hook. Who I liked as Hook, but the movie always felt short for me because I'd been watching this series religiously in the early 90s on, I think it was like a Fox animated series in the afternoons, and Tim Curry was such a great Captain Hook. And I can see exactly why they would want him to do the Joker.
The whole typecasting situation.
Yes.
Tim Curry does 3 characters well, or rather did before he was forced to retire.
Yeah.
Villains, English people, and butlers.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
but always
all
good.
At once.
And transvestites, if we're going to go for Rocky Horror.
Well, that would be a villain, but yeah.
A little villainy.
But we have been mentioning Disney for a while. So Here is our trivia question.
Uh-oh.
Which 3 Disney voiceovers were the favorite amongst the Disney executives? Which 3 Disney voiceovers were the most favorite of the Disney executives? And keep in mind, this is only theatrical releases, so no Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, no live action remakes, no, just the classical theatrical releases.
Are we going how far back are we going is the question?
Like Renaissance.
Well, I mean,
don't answer the question, I will reveal the answer.
Okay, I don't answer it.
All right. We want to see if the audience can.
Gotcha.
But yes, we have been talking about theater people acting, and they have been known to do a good job. In fact, Major Attaway, the second genie, not sure if you all follow One Piece, but he actually voiced Queen in the Funimation version. And I honestly thought he did a good job of it.
Yeah, it was funny. Where I was really excited about the project with you is I love that you sent me for kind of a voice inspiration. You sent me to Tailspin, which made me laugh really, really hard. And then I went down the rabbit hole and started watching a bunch of Tailspin because that was another show I grew up on and watched religiously on TV.
First off, awesome. Second, here's a little bit of upcoming episode. Do you know that we actually have an episode based on a Tailspin episode?
I think you mentioned something about that, but I don't know the specifics.
Do you remember the episode where the inventor builds this robot that can fly the plane?
Yes.
Yeah, that. MODOK is replacing all the superheroes with adaptoids.
Like it. Love it.
But
That was a great that's a great example of a cartoon that took well-known characters and not only revoiced them, but rebooted them. I mean, Tailspin one of the earliest reboots we actually have, if you want to get technical about
I would
it.
say more of a spin-off.
Spin-off. I mean, Baloo is not the same Baloo.
Well, I mean, if we're going to go back even further, technically the Jungle Book Baloo is not the same Baloo because he was more of a drill sergeant than anything else. And they always pronounce Mowgli's name wrong when it's actually Mowgli. But I'm not here to split hairs.
I mean, I Tailspin and Darkwing Duck were like synonymous. I think I watched them back to back. I think they aired like one after the other when I was watching both
Maybe
those
they're
ones.
reruns for Tailspin, but
yeah,
it only lasted one season.
Was it really only one season?
165 episode season.
Wow. 65. I mean, that's wild that seasons were. You could have a 65 episode season. That's crazy. That's why it seems so
nowadays,
long.
Seasons are usually between 8 and 13 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're on a network, the networks are still sticking at the 22, 24 season, which is I think is a
really
terrible idea.
On the series in general.
Yeah.
South Park, they've been doing 20 for a while.
Now they're doing 6 in a movie each. Like they're basically they've turned it all into specials, and they're just doing, which I love.
The latest special about the obesity pandemic.
The end of obesity, yeah. I just caught up on all my so I was doing shows, so back to back. I had no time for TV stuff. So this is the first month I've had off since I got back into this. And I caught up on everything, but I went through multiple seasons of South Park and all of their specials and watched. And Parker and Stone are great examples of just people that love the medium and that don't take the voice acting necessarily super seriously, but they do really interesting things with it. Yeah, they do really interesting things with it.
Parker goes for the whole City Walk guy. Just makes me laugh.
They always swing for the fences on it, and they do a lot of really interesting stuff with the processing on it, because some of the times they're pitching their voices up themselves. Other times they're pitching it up with a machine. It always sounds pretty consistent. They do really good work. I'm always impressed with it.
They do both raw. I can't English today. On and off the screen.
Yes, very much.
But we have been talking about theaters. Theater voice actors. I think we should talk about a couple of other different voice actors. Comedian-based voice actors.
Great.
We've got Gilbert Gottfried.
Yes.
He's voiced several different characters like Iago from Aladdin. Mr. Mixia-Spitalik from the DCAU Superman series.
Well, you mentioned, you brought up Tom Kenny. I always think Tom Kenny's a really fascinating story in that he was a comedian, a stand-up. He auditioned for SNL and got rejected from SNL. And right on the heels of getting rejected for SNL, he picks up SpongeBob. And it changes his entire life. And if he had done SNL, he would never have been SpongeBob.
Well, yeah, a lot of the voice actors that do exist are so good because they can fluctuate their tones a lot better than many individuals can. Like Charlie Adler, I believe, was also a stand-up comedian for a while. In case if that name sounds familiar, you probably recognized him from the myriads of voices he's done on Rocko's Modern Life, Cow and Chicken from Cow and Chicken, plus the red guy, because they can't say devil, and even a few characters on Tailspin, including Mad Dog from the Air Pirates.
Well, it's kind of it's interesting with I think the comedians share a lot of DNA with another type of voice actor, and I don't want to like derail us from talking about the comedian side of it, but a a lot of comedians are great impressionists, and
I mean, it's basically splitting hairs. It's like
yeah,
that. There's no like. This is the one thing that really annoys me about streaming services, other than the fact that they're reintroducing segregation by having Black stories and all this other stuff. It's like, but I'm not going to get into that. What annoys me is that they have comedy, and I see the stuff that passes off for comedy.
hmm
Like, are you sure that's supposed to be funny?
It's well, and one of the ones I was thinking of, and I had looked him up before this because I'm a fan. I didn't know he also comes from a stand-up comedy background, which I didn't know, is Maurice LaMarche, who is maybe one of my favorites in terms of doing fantastic impressions from all over the place, from things that everyone knows like Animaniacs, to lesser known things. Like one of my favorite animated series of all time is The Critic, with John Lovitz, which was Maurice LaMarche was all over that series doing movie parody voices, and he was already doing his what became his Brain, which is his Orson Welles impersonation, which is dead on.
It is pretty dead on, especially if you've ever seen Transformers the movie. Sorry,
Yep.
Transformers.
The Transformers. No, he does. I love the ones that kind of are great, because I think that's something that the Simpsons cast has proven themselves to be fantastic at. If you listen to interviews with Hank Azaria, he talks about almost all the characters are combinations of actors, of famous actors that he is kind of aping. Billy West did the same thing all over Futurama. Their Kif in Futurama is based off of an old actor from back in the day. Mo is based off of young Al Pacino. Basically his like high pitched voice, add some gravel into it, that becomes Mo. It's really interesting. These guys they have great ears for that, and that's why you can have 5 to 6 core cast members on a show like Futurama and The Simpsons, and you can have a cast of 150, and they really don't sound like. I love Family Guy. I love Seth MacFarlane. I think most of the characters sound pretty much the same to one another, and they make jokes of it all the time. They'll have a character that sounds exactly like another one.
Then I think that makes it better.
It's fun, but I think The Simpsons does a phenomenal job of stretching into very distinct different voices for so many different characters, and that is not easy to do.
We've been mentioning a lot of famous names as far as voice acting goes, so I'm going to give you a question. We're going to erect a Mount Rushmore of the best voiceovers, actors, whatever you want to call them, of all time.
All right.
Who do you think deserves a head?
First up is probably Frank Welker. I think he's had fingerprints on so many things.
Chronologically or order?
I'm just talking in general. If you want to look at a body of work and someone that has consistently lent their voice to not just animated films, to movies, just making sound effects and voices for the Mogwais and Gremlins, from doing the sound effects for Niffler before he actually had a voice in the show. Like, he has done, I really think he's done almost more than anybody else in terms of voice acting.
He was Bronx in Gargoyles. # keep binging Gargoyles.
He was the original Fred in Scooby-Doo.
Totoro in My Neighbor Totoro.
He was all over the Transformers, multiple Transformers.
Pretty much every Disney animal within the Renaissance era, and some before and after.
And also just random. He's guard number 3 and peasant number 1, and like he's all over. Like, he comes and does these one-offs for just a single line or a reaction or a sound effect. I think the guy has got just massive stretch for it. So he's on my Mount Rushmore for sure.
I would definitely say Mel Blancs.
Yes, 100%.
I would say he's like the original voice actor.
Yes.
So many Looney Tunes characters, and believe it or not, he did voice a Disney character.
Mel Blanc Disney character. It's a good question. I don't know. Who is this?
He was the cat in Pinocchio.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that.
Different fig. The other one, the one that was always accompanying the fox. He
was
supposed to have lines, but then he decided they thought it would be better to make him the mute sidekick. So pretty much
Nice.
Mel Blanc's only voiceover role in that movie was just a single hiccup.
That's fantastic. I love that.
And he's still credited for it.
I think those are two great choices. I think just in terms of someone that like kind of pivoted their entire career and became so known for it, I think Mark Hamill is on here. I think Mark Hamill has one of the most iconic voice performances. I mean, I would almost make it let's make it a Two-Face to keep it in the genre. It's Conroy and Hamill on just splitting face on there.
Okay, yeah. So the Conroy Hamill duo, I'll agree.
Yeah.
That. I think the last spot should be Steve Bloom because he's not only teaching voices to another generation, but he is actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for most prolific voice actor for video games.
Really?
And
no kidding.
Most American-based voice actors, he started off in anime.
And that's funny, that's a realm that I'm so not well versed in. I think it's very important that you're talking about, which is video game voice acting. I'm not a gamer, so I know that's such a huge world though out there in terms of actors getting to do just amazing things and getting really prolific.
Well, that's the problem I personally have. It's like just because you think you can excel in one area, people automatically think you can excel in that same other area. It's like just because I'm a musician, people automatically assume I can voice act.
Well, I'll give you a question.
Look at all the voice actors that have become.
Yeah. So I'll give you. So let's do
the that god awful Lion King movie, Aquafina, and shit.
There's two of them. I was gonna say, what is your bizarro Mount Rushmore? Who are the top four that should never have done voice acting that did voice? I know you named two of them, Aquafina and Beyonce.
Well, no, that's just the male one. The female deserve their own little Mount Rushmore.
Okay, gotcha.
My biggest problem is that there's no range in her voice. A lot of times they sound exactly the same.
And you're talking about Aquafina in Mermaid,
Ryan the Last Dragon,
the
Bad Guys movie where she voiced a spider or something, the new Kung Fu Panda movie, which honestly didn't need to exist.
Yeah, I only watched the first. I really loved the first Kung Fu Panda. I thought it was great. I didn't watch any of them past it.
I'll watch the second one.
Maybe I did. Is the second one the one with Ian McShane?
That's the tiger. The first one with Ty Lung.
That's the first one.
Who's a snow leopard, by the way. I don't want to be
that
guy. But, yeah.
That's okay. That's totally okay. I have terrible memory.
The second one was with Shen. He was a peacock who basically genocided the pandas because
I remember. I did see the second one. I did. I saw the second one.
And then the last one was
I didn't.
Well,
the second one had was the second one that had the sequence with the fire. There was like a whole like differently animated sequence with like I remember there was like a fire raining down. Maybe I don't think it was the first one. I think it was the second one. Had a really clever piece of animation on it, if I recall, but I might be mistaken.
I think that might be the second one. The third one was with J.K. Simmons, where he voices a bull or some kind of cattle.
Oh, maybe I did see that. Maybe I saw more of these than I thought.
I mean,
they weren't very memorable, I guess.
A decade ago.
I think I might have seen the third one then as well. I think I might have watched all three of those.
Cool, but that one, but for the the Bizarro Mount Rushmore of male voice actors, that's tricky.
Is there like a celebrity casting? So I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of times that we want to knee-jerk dislike a celebrity casting for a voice role, thinking that, there's so many voice actors out there that could be good. But I'll argue that a lot of if it's cast well and the person is game. So, and this might be polarizing. I don't know how you feel about the casting of this character, but I really, really love Bradley Cooper's Rocket Raccoon. I'm wearing a Guardians hat right now.
Honestly, I didn't mind his. I was surprised that was him.
Yeah.
Like Benedict Cumberbatch, I love the dedication they put into the role.
Yes.
Bradley Cooper went to a raccoon sanctuary, and Cumberbatch went to a reptile house.
and
small.
crawled around like a dragon recording that in a mocap for it. I think that's where I really appreciate, like, I've watched recording sessions with Bradley Cooper as Rocket, and it is the most intense, just like literally leaving everything on the table on it, which I really do appreciate that from an actor that he doesn't have to. He could come in there and half-ass that shit. And I'm sorry, I don't know if
all half-assed.
I apologize. I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this or not. So
I don't give a shit. Go on.
Okay. Right.
Besides, my theme song literally says "screw cancel culture" in there.
Gotcha.
So I mean, ship sailed.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of miscast voice people.
I was going to say
on
one of the later Garfields, but then I found out it was Frank Welker. I'm like, oh.
But listen, everyone's got a clunker in them. If you've got, how many credits does Frank Welker have? How many hundreds of credits? Not all of them are going to be amazing.
Fair enough. I mean, there's some that are more iconic than others.
True. I think I'm trying to think.
Even when you see when you do a Q&A with a lot of the voiceovers, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I was in X, Y, and Z." Like they forgot it already.
Yeah. I don't love Matthew Broderick in Lion King. I don't know that it's my favorite Simba reading, but it's because it's not iconic to me. Like I think you could put anybody in that and the movie still works. I don't think you can say that about the other characters
Irons
in it.
And James Earl Jones really sold it.
They do it. I think Nathan Lane and Sabella are great.
Questionable. Like if you replaced Zazu's voice actor with Tim Curry, you could still.
I mean, that was Rowan Atkinson. I think did a good. That's Mr. Bean doing Zazu. I think he's good. You got Robert Guillaume as Rafiki. I think that cast is really stacked. I think it stands out to me that Matthew Broderick is the one that I'm just like, he's fine. He's not bad, but I could replace him and make the movie better.
Okay, I can definitely see that. I never actually go out of my way to look for bad voice actors. I mean, I always hear voice actors that sound the same in a lot of their roles.
Sure.
Like Norm
I mean,
Macdonald,
you mentioned
for
James Earl Jones is a great voice actor. He always sounds like James Earl Jones.
Yeah, or Norm Macdonald. He kind of always has the same dry wit for all of his characters. From the dog in Dr. Dolittle to the pigeon in the Mike Tyson TV series.
I know. I have a good friend of mine.
Oh, maybe Adam Sandler. He kind of has a lot of. He's got more bad roles than he does have good ones.
He was one of the choices. He was in the running for Rocket against Cooper. He was one of the final people that was going to.
He always has that baby voice.
Yeah.
I mean, between the Hotel Transylvania to, even though this is a guilty pleasure, 8 Crazy Nights.
Oh, that is I'm so sorry. It's one of, I think there are 2 movies in my entire life I've walked out of a theater, and Crazy Nights was one of them. I couldn't make it through it. What's that?
I've walked out of Cats, so I don't blame you.
I would never have gone.
I didn't walk out of it. We did a streaming thing.
Yeah.
My friends and I did. And I'm I just turned it off. I'm like, done.
James Corden's not a great voice actor or actor.
I mean, James Corden.
He was in Cats. He was the fat cat. He had a talk show. British actor. I don't know. I'm sure he's done other voiceover work. He's done a lot of movies, more than he should have. But
well, I mean, that could be said for a lot of people.
This is very true. I'm trying to think of like casting where I've been really upset of hearing. I think it happens to me more often in live action than it does in voiceover.
I will agree with you on that. Like, Patton Oswalt is good for some things. Like, I kind of liked him as MODOK. A lot better than the MCU MODOK.
Yes.
But then it was weird that he was the koala from We Bare Bears.
I'll also never like fault anybody
from BoJack Horseman. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, I love BoJack is a masterclass of writing and acting and voice work, and that's we didn't mention Will Arnett when we talk about voiceover work, and that's somebody that has been very prolific.
Name you think of when you hear the name Batman?
I still think Conroy, but I love that Arnett got his day. I think that he had such promise with Arrested Development, and then but BoJack is a work of art. It really is just one of the most phenomenally underrated animated series of all time.
No, but I mean, if we're gonna do a female Mount Rushmore, I would definitely say, you saw DuckTales, right?
I did. The new DuckTales or the original DuckTales? Yes.
Who voiced the original Ma Beagle and June Foray?
I don't know.
She also did a whole bunch of other characters, like Rocky.
It's funny. I had June Foray on my list, actually.
June Foray, yeah. I would definitely put her there because a lot of people will say that June Foray is the female Mel Blanc. Then a lot of people will say that Mel Blanc is just the male June Foray.
June Foray was on my list of ones to talk about today. Growing up on Rocky and Bullwinkle, especially, that was she was just a household name, and so iconically known. But yeah, I liked her voice was interesting to me. She had I think that's also there are voice actors. So like you look at somebody who did Babe and also was in Rugrats, Elizabeth Daily, who's also in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, if you want to see her in live action. But she's got such a unique and distinct voice that I think it's interesting.
Apparently thinks she's a good voice actor. So she wants to get a few meows in there if you're picking that up.
I listen to anybody that's a fan of Elizabeth Daily, I think is okay in my books. For sure.
I'd say Tara Strong would be another good candidate. I mean, she's one of the few female voice actors that also does male characters. Timmy Turner.
Nancy Cartwright. Famously Nancy Cartwright. And I'll say I have
McNeil
one very
would be a good candidate.
Chris, she's on my list. But I have one that I will absolutely put on there just because I love everything she's done live action and not. And she wrote and directed an amazing series, and that's Pamela Adlon, who
Bobby Hill, right?
Yeah, she was Bobby Hill, and she even wrote. So her series called Better Things was a show on FX where she was playing a fictionalized version of herself, but it's great because she's getting all of these voiceover and acting gigs, but also working with a lot of voiceover actors in it as well that are like getting some work in there in live action. Highly recommend that show. It's a beautiful piece of work. But she's a phenomenal actress, and I love her upbringing of just killing it on voice acting. And Bobby Hill's an amazing character, absolutely amazing.
Very good recommendation. I would say Debbie Derryberry, who's done the trifecta of anime, cartoon, and I want to say video game, but I know she's definitely done anime voiceovers.
I know a lot of these ones we're mentioning. If you go into their IMDb, they've got a game or two in there. Like they may not be like major roles in it, but they're like, especially like almost everyone has done a voice in Grand Theft Auto. Like someone out there has done a Grand Theft Auto voice. It's just
a classic Wilhelm scream.
Yes, exactly. Like they're pedestrian number 3. Like their voice is being popped in there on that stuff.
I've just always found it funny that you get the bigger names for the main characters when those are the stars of the show, but you get people that actually know the craft.
Mm-hmm.
As like bit players.
What do you think, in your opinion, since we're kind of talking about acting is not voice acting, what do you think are like the 3 tenets that are most important for voice acting that are maybe a little bit different from regular acting, let's call it? I would
definitely say range. Because, well, let's look at people like voice technicians. When I did my episode with Greg Wiseman, he told me every project he does, he needs to have Jeff Bennett because he's definitely a solid voice technician. He Brooklyn in Gargoyles. He was Joker in Batman, Brave and the Bold, Johnny Bravo. Just a handful of the characters he's voiced over the years.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's one range. What do you got for 2?
I would say enthusiasm.
Love it.
Like, let's look at Robin Williams, God rest his soul.
Mm-hmm.
He was all over the place. He was definitely emoting. You could definitely tell he wasn't just doing this for a paycheck. He was just doing this to get into character.
Yeah.
Which is why I really don't like the Will Smith Robin Williams.
Nah. What did you think of the in between when they had Dan Castellaneta come in to do it for Return of Jafar?
Not bad. I mean, I know
Yeah.
Disney was going through some legal stuff.
He's not Robin Williams, but he wasn't bad. I agree. That's kind of how I feel.
I would say
about
it's
that.
like how a Beyond Burger's and a real burger. Trying to make do with what the best you have. So like, yeah, okay,
When they say
it's not
that,
bad.
when they say we have Genie at home, and then Genie at home is,
Or
is Homer.
this is Genie from Wish.
Yeah. He was not bad, but he was. I'm sure he got
I
a
would
nice
say
little payday
it
for it.
goes
But
Robin Williams Genie, James Monroe, Eaglehart Genie.
yeah,
The Japanese one, I did see that one, not bad. Dan Castellaneta, and then Will Smith.
I'm gonna put one in there, which is there was a TV series back in the day called Fairy Tale Theater, a Shelley Duvall series, and they did an Aladdin on there with Leonard Nimoy as the genie. He was a badass genie. I'm gonna say it.
Yeah, the only thing I can really picture him as a badass was Galvatron from the
Yeah.
Transformers the movie.
It's damn good. Good voice actor.
Yeah, but speaking of that movie, musicians. Do they?
Musicians in voice acting.
I mean, Scatman Carruthers was definitely a jazz musician,
Uh,
and therefore
yes.
has played a lot of good characters. Jazz from the Transformers series, Scat Cat from the Aristocats,
Yeah.
the original Hong Kong Phooey, just to name a few.
Phenomenal. Just a phenomenal actor in general, but a very good voice actor as well.
I mean, who's
That's-
another musician we can think of?
So did Bowie ever do VO work?
I know,
He
and this is
acted.
kind of funny. I know that Weird Al Yankovic did.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
He actually voiced Wreck-Gar in Transformers the Animated, and it actually kind of
Yeah.
pays homage to the character in the series.
So what I think is so one of the reasons I brought up Bowie, because I think it's funny. I think there are two iconic Disney villains that are very phenomenally good actors doing their version of Bowie. One is Jeremy Irons in Lion King. Be Prepared is a David Bowie song. If you listen to that and try to and just think that you're listening to David Bowie singing it, it sounds identical. And the other is Jermaine Clement in Moana as Tamatoa.
That I believe more than Be Prepared. Incidentally, that's the one thing I couldn't stand about the Favreau version. They
Mhm.
kind of made it into like a chant.
Yeah, they removed the song, which is a bunch of bullshit. I'm sure he could have sung it. It's an iconic villain song. That bummed me out. That bummed me out more than anything else in that movie. That bummed me out. I love that
really
song.
Did that kind of annoys the shit out of me.
Yeah, that one's not for me. But
Katy Perry, she was the Smurfette, the Smurf movie. Not sure if
I know.
that's the
Well,
best
Justin
example.
Timberlake did the Trolls movies, which I've not watched. I'll be honest, I've not seen any
I
of
know
them.
of
But
them. It's like
yeah,
they're like the Dreams Work movie you can skip. Like a lot
Yeah,
of the
I
new
have no
Disney
interest,
movies that are there are ones you can skip.
and there's the Sing movies, which have the Sing movies have actual. Some of them have actual singers
Some of
in
them are
them.
actors, some of them are actors that can sing,
Yeah,
and some of them are musicians, and some comedians. Like
yeah.
who's the guy that plays Ron in Parks and Rec?
Oh, Nick Offerman.
Nick
Yeah.
Offerman. Yeah, he was one of the characters there.
Great.
But a lot of
And
his
his wife-
voiceover roles just sounds like him talking.
Yeah. Well, his wife, Megan Mullally, does a lot of voice work, and another stage person. I'm going to keep coming back to it. It all goes back. And, it's funny because you mentioned the first thing that's important for a voice actor is range. And that's something that I've found it, especially if you ever worked ensemble in a show. So I did a show last month. I finished it up called Ragtime. and I played 10 different roles in that show. And some of them only have like 2 lines or 3 lines. You got to pop on stage and you've got a costume that's going to help you out a little bit. But, and we had other people that were doing the same thing that I don't think like varied their voice or posture or look, or like they didn't really become something different. And that's something I very much get from voice acting is like none of the characters I was doing, even if they had just one line, sounded like the one I was doing the scene before.
Okay,
Just because I think it's a
so
disservice.
I had range and enthusiasm,
Yeah,
correct?
I love it. And then number 3.
I would say research,
Hmm.
because if you're going to do anything, any form of acting, you should definitely research it. Like we mentioned with Bradley Cooper and Benedict
Yeah.
Cumberbatch. They researched their roles by researching the animals themselves.
They put
Or
in the
like
work.
if you're going to do a comic book character, you should definitely look at the previous incarnations media-wise, or even read
Yeah.
them and the comics themselves.
I've noticed, especially in live action, the ones that are really good, not all, listen, there's always going to be a ringer out there that is not reading the material that's just naturally good and they capture the essence of that character. But I do feel the ones that are really, really good, they have a passion for that character. They're reading the comics, they're reading the source material, they're bringing all of those years of character development that they've gotten through multiple authors and multiple artists. They bring that, they're bringing their favorite parts of each of those to the role. I agree with that one.
In fact, Colossus is actually kind of based on It's based on a lot of the customers I get from Home Depot to deal with a lot of Russian, Eastern European
Yeah.
individuals, as well as part of my literalness of
Mhm.
dealing with Asperger's and autism. Like a lot of this stuff, but we're blaming that on immigration stuff because by far English is way more diverse and less literal than the other languages are.
Mhm.
Like one of the lines we have is he literally calls out Gene for being a racist. Like, wait, why am I racist? When I'm doing my doing my laundry, you always tell me to celebrate the colors from the whites.
Very literal.
Yeah. Or the one aspect we have with the still up for audition, by the way, is he's speaking with the Gardner. He's like,
Mhm.
Gardner's like, I know English, but this is taken, I know, as in I can speak it. But because Colossus is Colossus,
Mhm.
he says, I know English too.
So
So he takes the literal approach.
yeah.
And he'll say some things that he doesn't think sound dirty, but do sound dirty.
Sure.
So they do say when you're creating a character, writing, voicing, acting, that you're also creating a part of yourself in it.
Mm-hmm. You always you find your truth. That's the actory things. Find the truth in the character for you, even if you're playing someone so terrible that you feel that you can't empathize with or identify with. You've got to find the thing that you can. And also if you've got just a one, I always try to get out of your way. If it's one line or 2 line, you want to make sure it sounds different and in character, but you also don't want to be drawing attention necessarily away from what else is going on around you in the scene.
I mean,
Some things are just
Robin
perfunctory.
Williams that for Aladdin because they couldn't actually win Best Original Script because they had to keep redoing it because of his improvisation.
It was funny. I just read an article yesterday. They were talking about the Howard the Duck movie and their original casting.
Back from the 80s?
Yep, the one, and the guy who wound up doing it, another theater actor wound up doing it, Chip Zien, but Robin Williams was their initial casting for it. But they had shot most of the movie, so the voice actor that they were bringing in had to line up with how the mouth of the puppet, or the animatronic mouth that they were using for this character. And Robin Williams found it too constraining. He couldn't do anything. He lined up the lines exactly how the mouth was moving, so he dropped out and they brought in another guy last minute.
Good call.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are actors that do it well. Like, you ever see that Disney show, or ABC show on dinosaurs?
Yeah, love that show.
Yeah,
Great voice actors in that.
Seeing Mallory from Archer
Yeah.
as a mama dinosaur.
And the mom from Arrested Development.
Well, yeah, when we're
rest
talking
in peace.
animated
Yeah.
works, but
Yeah.
also the MILF from The Big Bang Theory if you want to bring live action stuff into it.
Yeah. That was a great Henson Company show, and a phenomenally deep voice acting list on dinosaurs. Everybody was in that show. It was unreal. So many more than I remember. It's so funny. I was literally looking at this the other day. I don't know why. I went on a rabbit hole for some actor and turned out they were in it. And I was like, oh, wow, there were a lot of, Kevin Clash, our current Elmo, was a voice on that show.
Yeah, he did a lot of stuff. He was actually Splinter for the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, original TMNT movie. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like we mentioned, a lot of the people that do have the same voiceovers still manage to pull it off.
Yeah. If you're good, you can sound the same. And listen, the animation is doing a lot of heavy lifting for you. That you're looking at a completely different shaped, designed, animated character each time. So like when I hear, Lorenzo Music doing Peter Venkman in Real Ghostbusters and Garfield, one of them is a giant orange cat and the other is a human being. So it's like yes, they sound the same, but they're not
the same. Or hell,
the
we
same.
can take that to a step further. He was also one of the original gummy bears in the Gummy Bears, and he was the Oafish
Goof Troop.
I was gonna say the Oafish Thembrian from Tailspin.
Yeah, I remember him a lot from because he also did Goof Troop. He and Paulson crossed characters, I think, a little bit. They have a similar kind of voice range.
I don't really see it from Paulson.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it. But back to what I was saying, one example of people sounding exactly the same, but still being able to pull it off, is Wendy Malick.
Yeah, great.
She was Eda the Owl Lady. She's kind of like got the spunky rogue character to her, but still also kind of being a mama-esque bird.
Yeah.
We got Bojack's mom. That took a way darker turn, more cynical. And the pregnant mom from The Emperor's New Groove, which had a more sweeter side to it.
Emperor's New Groove is another one that I know that it's a little bit of stunt casting for the leads, but I really like Goodman and
Patrick Warburton is definitely one of those typecasted voiceover from Joe to Broderick. I think Broderick.
He's on the minor Mount Rushmore for me. He does phenomenally great voice acting. He's the same voice.
Typecasted, then it works. He's just the buff, angry, loud guy.
Yeah, but he's got great nuance to the buff, angry, loud guy. Like better than anybody.
I mean, maybe Ron Perlman should be on there because he does anti-heroes to villains to.
And you got to figure anyone that's like, even though it's live action, you look at something like Hellboy. There's so much prosthetics and makeup on there. It's almost like doing a voice role.
Well, he actually did do some voiceovers for Hellboy in a couple of the animated movies. So it's not that far of a stretch.
For sure.
But yeah, is there anything else you want to mention?
No, I think we made it through almost all of my notes. I was looking here. I don't think there's anything nothing important.
I mean, we could even go a step further and talk about international shows. Beast Wars, believe it or not, is actually a Canadian show.
Oh, yeah?
And a lot of the actors from there did land other voice roles in other series. Like, bringing back to X-Men Evolution, a lot of the voice actors from Beast Wars found their way to that, which technically speaking would be international voiceover work.
And technically speaking, Wolverine should always be voiced by a Canadian, but
Yeah, but we'll have to settle for a 6-foot Australian man.
still good. Still good.
That was just one example. David Kay, apparently an interesting choice for Charles Xavier.
Mhm.
Because he couldn't get enough satisfaction as Megatron. The woman that voiced Black Arachnia was Jean Grey, and the guy that voiced Rhinox, Omega Red.
Oh wow.
So it really just kind of goes to show you the kind of range, but doing it stuff from a country you're not native to is a
Sure.
different animal altogether because of the way the lips move.
Well, also just the idea of when you talk about dubbing and voiceovers in terms of there's a whole community of people. I have friends actually in South Florida that do professional VO work and they do translations. So they do Spanish translations of English properties, and that's they're reinterpreting or matching characters in another language for that language base. And it's super interesting to think. I know we like kind of frown upon it in the US in terms of having someone dub foreign property into English.
Oh, please, that's just a weeb thing. Half
Yeah.
the people that complain about it can't even speak Japanese.
Yeah. But for my sister-in-law is from Mexico, and she hinges on that. She and her children a lot of times will watch things in Spanish language and Spanish dubbing on there, just because it's more comfortable and easier and approachable for them to do it. And it's a huge community out there.
The fandom. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as it's not as god awful as like the 4Kids dub.
Well, it's also, I mean, you think about dubbing though, this is for live action as well. So there's a whole community of people that are voice acting out there internationally on both sides of it. And their work is to interpret a live action piece in another language, which is got to be a really difficult, that would, I would think, be one of the hardest things I could think to do in voice
maybe
acting.
like CGI voice acting. Like,
yeah.
I know this was difficult for him. Clancy Brown.
Yeah.
Surtur for the third Thor movie.
Yeah. And he was great. I mean, listen, you got Clancy Brown's a phenomenally good actor with a very iconic voice to do that. But it is hard for a lot of people to do. I mean, that's why we talked about, Benedict Cumberbatch and Bradley Cooper are two examples of people that took CGI. You look at Andy Serkis as another one who's had a phenomenally good career doing voice and CGI acting.
We actually kind of pay homage to one of his characters in an upcoming The Undateable X-Men episode.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It was actually during Cassandra Nova's imprisonment. She starts singing What is Love from the Black Panther movie.
Oh, nice. I love it.
Yeah, I figured we do have a lot of cult references. I think in certain we added some mainstream references.
Very cool.
But
yeah, I think that's
CGI
all my list.
A whole different ballpark.
Well, you're looking at mocap and that, so it's a different thing where, when you're doing traditional voice. I mean, not to say that Disney animators for years have not been watching. When they animated the genie, they put a lot of Robin Williams into that character, so he's not necessarily doing traditional mocap.
There's only one Robin Williams, and there will only ever be one Robin Williams.
But you can see it in other ones where they're watching performances of people and kind of taking some of that into what they animate as well.
Absolutely. And as our episode is rounding up, here's the answer to the question. Three best voice acting according to the Disney executives, from most surprising to least surprising.
All right.
Scratch that, reverse it. Least surprising to most surprising. And I say that, and I'll explain why. Robin Williams, I'm nearly not going to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
James Woods from Hercules.
That's a little surprising to me, but...
The last one is Vincent Price in The Great Mouse Detective.
Okay.
I say that one for last because not a lot of people nowadays who know who Vincent Price is.
I know I'm very familiar with Vincent Price. I was very surprised that we don't have like a Sterling Holloway who was Ka and
Yeah, but
Winnie
he
the
also voiced
Pooh.
multiple roles, and this was for like around the 90s. He passed like 91. He was when like back when you were saying about studios and companies having a lot of recurring voice actors.
Yeah,
Carlo Candido was basically the original Frank Welker. He
yeah,
did a lot of animalistic noises, from the gator grunting and the rescuers to both Bagheera and Shere Khan roaring. A couple of wolf noises, I believe. The bear and Fun and Fancy Free, just so many to name.
that's what I was thinking. Sterling Holloway did kind of the same, and the other one that was I thought might be on your list was Thurl Ravenscroft, who has big Disney ties to all kinds of things, but also is in the Aristocats, Brave Little Toaster, Dalmatians, all over the place. Very iconic voice, the voice of the Haunted Mansion at Disney, among many other things.
Phil Harris, who was Baloo, his cut and copy counterpart, Little John, and
Yeah,
Thomas O'Malley.
yeah. There are some greats. There are many unsung heroes in the history of voice acting for sure.
Yeah, and too bad they always get overshadowed.
They do.
But that's then done. Would you like to tell everybody where they can find you, what social medias you have, etc.,
Oh goodness.
etc.?
I'll pimp our own podcast is probably the best place. My two buddies, Ben Wilson and Nick Santacroce, the three of us do a podcast called The New Way, by Last Pint Productions. We talk about pop culture and movies, TV, theater, literature, music, whatever's on our mind, with lots of really fun guests on there. But you can find The New Way wherever you listen to podcasts. It's, I'll tell you, when you go looking for it, there's going to be like several in front of it, which will be things like The New Way to Making Money or The New Way to Jesus. We're neither of those ones. Just look for the geekiest looking one on there. That is The New Way podcast with Matt, Ben, and Nick. So that's where you can find us.
Solid. Stay tuned next week as we continue the theme for this month, that of course being people that create geek culture. So as always, hit like, subscribe, follow for more content, as well as our the Undateable X-Men series. And remember that very one important thing: stay geeky.